Have you ever thought about what could happen if gas stations ran out of fuel? Experts are noting that the global oil market faces challenges that could impact fuel availability, though it's still uncertain how things will unfold. As oil supplies face increasing pressure due to global events and rising demand, millions of Americans may feel the consequences, especially those already facing economic difficulties. Those who are already struggling, including the homeless, will likely bear the greatest burden.
We got a call from family that said, you better fuel up before you hit Tennessee.
Tensions from the Israel-Iran conflict are escalating, pushing oil prices even higher. For those who can't afford to fill up their tanks, the risk is more than just an inconvenience. It could become a matter of survival. Imagine the chaos as gas stations close and the cost of living soars. What would that mean for the future of our communities? It's time to prepare, and it's time to act. Number 1. Homelessness, the rising situation. It's easy to think that nothing can really change in a society that's been standing for so long. After all, we've always had homelessness, right? But the truth is, the issue of homelessness in the United States has reached a point where we can no longer look away. Every day, thousands of Americans find themselves out on the streets, unable to afford the most basic human need: a home. Cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Seattle are bearing the brunt of this problem, and the consequences are severe, not only for the homeless, but for the broader communities around them. In Los Angeles County, over 60,000 people are currently homeless. It's a staggering number, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. In San Francisco, a city known for its tech wealth, the situation is even more alarming. Neighborhoods like Tenderloin see people sleeping on sidewalks with no shelter in sight. The issue of homelessness is complex, involving multiple factors such as housing shortages, mental health challenges, and systemic inequalities, which are interwoven and exacerbate the crisis. There's no single cause for homelessness. Contributing factors include the lack of affordable housing, mental health challenges, and systemic inequality. Rising living costs further exacerbate the problem, but many cities and organizations are developing solutions to help those in need. Without proper oversight, crime thrives. Areas with high rates of homelessness often see a rise in violent crimes as desperation grows. Local authorities are overwhelmed, and communities are suffering the consequences. But what's causing this crisis? It's not just the shortage of affordable housing. There's a failure to address root causes such as mental health, addiction, and systemic inequality. Rising living costs are just part of the puzzle. Without adequate healthcare or social safety nets, many people are falling through the cracks. And then, there's the impact of rising gas prices and oil crises. As costs climb, it's even harder for low-income families and the homeless to get by. How can we expect people to pull themselves up when the basic cost of survival is becoming out of reach? So, can we continue ignoring this issue, or is it time to take real action? Homelessness in the United States is a growing problem, and it's time to confront it head-on. We must ask ourselves, can we change the system, or are we allowing this crisis to continue? Number 2. Impact of the Israel-Iran conflict. Events in the Middle East are known for their global ripple effects, but the ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran is now showing signs of not only destabilizing the region, but also impacting the global economy, especially the oil market. The situation in the Middle East is concerning. The Israel-Iran conflict has the potential to impact global oil markets, though the full consequences remain unpredictable and depend on various factors. If key oil shipping routes are affected, oil prices could rise sharply, which may increase fuel costs for consumers worldwide. Now, Iran is threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz, a vital oil trade route. If this happens, 20% of global oil supply could be disrupted. What does this mean for global economies? Increased oil prices, potential shortages, and economic uncertainty. Currently, oil prices are around $75 per barrel, but some experts warn that prices could surge under certain scenarios. However, these predictions depend on a variety of factors, including geopolitical tensions and global market dynamics. Should this happen, gas prices will likely rise above $5 per gallon, placing an increased strain on consumers. But the implications go far beyond just higher prices at the gas pump. Oil is a key driver of global commerce. Transportation costs, for instance, will increase dramatically, causing prices of everyday goods to climb. Consumers, especially those in lower income brackets, will feel the squeeze the hardest. The question remains, can we control these escalating impacts, or will this conflict spark a global energy crisis? As the Israel-Iran conflict escalates, we see how oil prices are starting to respond. This, in turn, could lead to wider disruptions in oil supply chains, affecting global economies. Drop a comment with fuel crisis, because that's what could be on the horizon. Or say, global instability, because this conflict could affect much more than just our gas tanks. Stick around and watch until the end to understand the full scope of this crisis. You won't want to miss the final part. Number 3. Oil supply disruptions. Imagine a world without oil. Roads that once bustled with cars are now eerily empty, and gas stations stand desolate. The engines that once powered global commerce come to a halt. What would happen if this disruption were to occur? While it's uncertain, there are scenarios where oil supply could face challenges. We depend on oil. But oil supply disruptions are becoming more and more plausible with each passing day. The Strait of Hormuz is a choke point. It controls 20% of the world's oil supply. What if it shuts down? Prices will rise fast. Oil supply disruptions are a potential concern, especially in critical choke points like the Strait of Hormuz, which controls a significant portion of global oil traffic. If these routes are affected, we could see a rise in oil prices, which would also increase the cost of gas. For instance, in 2019, an attack on Saudi Arabia's oil facilities caused a temporary spike in prices, demonstrating the vulnerability of global oil supply chains. However, experts agree that such disruptions, while impactful, are usually short-term. Oil prices surged, and gas stations around the globe saw a sudden spike in prices. Within days, the cost of gasoline jumped dramatically. People were filling up their tanks faster than usual, and many stations even ran out of fuel. What would happen if this disruption were on a much larger scale? Could we handle it? In just a few weeks, prices can change drastically. Right now, oil prices are at $75 per barrel, but they could reach $300 per barrel if Iran enacts its threat. Can we handle that? How long can we keep relying on oil when things are so volatile? Transportation will become a nightmare. Shipping costs will surge. This will make everything more expensive. From food to basic products, prices will climb. How will the global supply chain cope with this? Oil supply disruptions are no longer a distant threat. They are happening now, and they will get worse if we don't prepare. The question is, are we ready for a world where oil isn't as accessible as it once was? Are you prepared for what's coming next? or will the ripple effects of this situation catch you off guard? Number 4. Gas price surge and the industries affected. Rising fuel prices may lead to financial strain, particularly for families dependent on transportation for work. However, industries can adapt to these changes with proper planning. If the cost of gas continues to rise, it could impact many industries, from transportation to food production. Rising fuel prices will affect many sectors, from transportation to food production. While these impacts may be felt, there are ways industries can adjust to manage costs and reduce strain. Let's take a closer look at how quickly this could become a reality. Right now, gas prices are already on the rise. If oil supply disruptions continue and global tensions escalate, we could see gas prices surge past $5 per gallon. For many, this would be a massive financial blow. But it doesn't stop there. The ripple effect of rising fuel costs will touch nearly every industry. The transportation industry will be one of the hardest hit. Trucks, trains, and ships rely on fuel to move goods across the country and around the world. When fuel costs rise, it means higher shipping costs for businesses. This directly impacts everything, from groceries to electronics to raw materials. With higher transportation costs, we'll see a domino effect across all industries, making everyday goods more expensive. But it's not just big corporations feeling the squeeze. For many individuals, particularly those living paycheck to paycheck, this could spell disaster. The working class, especially those who rely on driving for work or travel, will feel this price surge the hardest. Think about it: a single mom driving to work, or a delivery driver suddenly faced with dramatically higher fuel costs. It could become impossible for some to afford basic necessities, pushing them further into poverty and homelessness. Food prices will also skyrocket. Agriculture and food production rely heavily on transportation to get products from farms to grocery stores. When fuel costs increase, the price of everything from fruits and vegetables to meat will follow suit. And it won't stop there. Manufactured goods, consumer products, and even healthcare could all become more expensive as well. While some industries might feel the impact of higher fuel costs more than others, such as transportation and food production, it's important to remember that these are market dynamics we can influence with sustainable practices and improved infrastructure. If oil prices continue to rise, how long can industries keep up with the costs? And how long before ordinary people begin to feel the brunt of a fuel price crisis? So, here's the million-dollar question. Is this the beginning of the end for the global supply chain, or is this just a temporary shock we'll manage to overcome? Number 5. The decline of America's infrastructure. We're living in a world that depends on infrastructure. But what if it starts to fall apart? Oil refineries, pipelines, public transportation, they're all in trouble. Have you noticed the cracks? And if we don't fix them soon, everything changes. Many oil refineries are operating below optimal capacity due to outdated infrastructure and a lack of investment. Upgrades are needed to keep pace with demand, but the financial and regulatory barriers remain high. This is a key issue that needs to be addressed to ensure energy security. Pipelines leaking, risking global oil supply. The future of fuel is uncertain. Will the high taxes make things worse? Let's take a real-world example. In 2020, the Colonial Pipeline, one of the largest pipelines in the US, was hacked, shutting down fuel supply across much of the East Coast. This disruption caused panic buying, empty gas stations, and massive price hikes in just a few days. That's how vulnerable our infrastructure is. High taxes and outdated systems are just adding fuel to the fire. What happens when public transportation fails? Cities are growing, but the systems are outdated. High taxes are pushing people away. People are turning back to their cars. That means more traffic, more pollution. But who's paying the price? Here's the kicker. When fuel supply drops, everything becomes more expensive. Food prices soar. Basic products rise. The working class feels it the most. Could this push more people into poverty and homelessness? The truth? America's infrastructure faces challenges due to underinvestment, but it's not too late to make necessary upgrades. So, what's next? Are we really prepared for the consequences of ignoring infrastructure, or will we find ourselves in an even worse situation? The clock is ticking. Number 6. Energy crisis warning. While everyone is caught up in debates about climate change and renewable energy, a bigger warning is becoming impossible to ignore. The global energy market is undergoing challenges, but steps are being taken to improve energy security through more efficient energy practices and renewable sources. The world is changing, and so is our reliance on energy sources. As global oil supplies become more unpredictable, we find ourselves at the mercy of a system that's increasingly fragile. The world's biggest oil producers are facing rising geopolitical tensions, and if this continues, we'll see the energy market collapse like a house of cards. Have you noticed how vulnerable we are to these changes? We can't keep turning a blind eye. Take a look at 2021, when energy prices surged due to a series of disruptions. The global energy demand increased, but supply didn't keep pace. Gas prices rose sharply in many parts of the world, forcing people to reconsider how they use fuel. How did we react? Did we prepare for the consequences? Energy shortages are no longer hypothetical. From power outages in major cities to fuel shortages during the pandemic, we are witnessing how energy supply disruptions can unravel our modern way of life. Prices spike, and for families already struggling with inflation, the shock is even harder to bear. The real question is, how long can we continue to ignore the warning signs? Could we have prepared better for the coming crisis? The situation is rapidly deteriorating, and soon it might be too late to reverse the damage. The cost of energy is already rising, but when the real crisis hits, what will we do? Energy security is facing challenges due to growing demand and geopolitical tensions. However, there are efforts underway globally to increase energy efficiency and transition to renewable sources, which offer hope for the future. And as fossil fuels continue to dominate the global market, we are playing with fire. While energy supply disruptions are possible, especially as fossil fuel reliance continues, many countries are investing in renewable energy to reduce this vulnerability. Number 7. Fuel shortages and panic. When people start to panic over skyrocketing gas prices, our economic system will become more fragile than ever. Fuel shortages, if they occur, could lead to challenges beyond just high prices, affecting transportation and supply chains. Gas prices hitting $5 per gallon or more is no longer a far-off possibility. It's a real risk that could happen very soon. As oil supplies continue to be volatile, people will rush to gas stations, fearing a total collapse of supply. Panic buying will escalate, and some stations will run out of fuel within hours. The question is, can we handle this level of disruption? This isn't just an inconvenience. Fuel shortages impact everything from transportation costs to the availability of essential goods. The homeless crisis worsens, with the poorest communities facing even higher living costs. The rising fuel prices will hit hardest those who can least afford it. Consider what happened in 2021 when fuel shortages led to widespread panic and gas stations running dry in some parts of the US. In a matter of hours, prices surged and people scrambled to fill their tanks. That's a glimpse of what we may face on a much larger scale. What happens when there's no fuel left? With rising oil costs, industries will face massive operational challenges. From food production to delivery services, everything will become more expensive. And for those already living paycheck to paycheck, the added strain could push them deeper into poverty and homelessness. While fuel shortages may lead to challenges, there are ways to manage demand and ensure stability. Communities can adapt by planning and exploring alternatives. What can we do to prevent this? Can we stabilize the energy market, or are we setting ourselves up for disaster without realizing it? As oil prices climb, it's no longer a question of if gas stations will run out of fuel, but when. Drop a comment with "energy crisis" because that's what it might lead to. Or comment "stay prepared" if you think it's time to act. Watch till the end to see the full picture of what's coming. You don't want to miss the conclusion. Number 8. The impact of the oil crisis. Oil is more than just a fuel. It's the lifeblood of modern society. It influences everything we do, from commuting to work to buying groceries. But as oil prices surge and public services begin to struggle, how will we cope? What happens when the very systems we rely on start to falter because the energy crisis is too great to ignore? As gas prices rise, the effects ripple through every part of our daily lives. For instance, public transportation, something so essential to city dwellers, will begin to feel the strain. Buses and trains, crucial to those who cannot afford a car, will run less frequently or even grind to a halt, leading to traffic jams that will worsen the already congested roads, especially in cities like New York or Los Angeles, where public transit is often the only option for many. But it doesn't stop there. The impact of fuel shortages extends to critical sectors like emergency services. Ambulances, fire trucks, and police cars rely heavily on fuel to reach emergencies. What happens when they can't get enough fuel to respond quickly? Lives are at risk, especially in disasters or accidents where every second counts. Then there's the healthcare sector. Hospitals and medical facilities are heavily reliant on fuel to transport medical supplies and personnel, especially in emergency situations. Imagine hospitals struggling to maintain essential services, like ambulance transport, during a fuel shortage. For those needing urgent care, the disruption could be disastrous. High taxes and rising fuel prices could add an extra layer of difficulty, pushing vulnerable communities even further into distress. How long can we ignore these dangers? Now, consider the food industry. Disruptions in transportation could lead to empty shelves in grocery stores, making it even harder for low-income families or the homeless to access food. The cost of basic essentials could skyrocket, compounding the economic inequality we already see. Those already on the edge will face even harder challenges as the ripple effect of fuel shortages devastates the food supply chain. The oil crisis affects various sectors, including transportation, healthcare, and food distribution. But with proper solutions, we can mitigate these effects. From public transportation to emergency services and even food distribution, the consequences are far-reaching. So, have we truly prepared for a world where oil prices continue to climb and these essential services begin to break down? Number 9. Preparing for the coming crisis. Can we truly be ready for the upcoming crisis? The answer isn't simple, but one thing is certain. Preparation for an energy crisis involves not only securing resources, but also adopting more sustainable energy practices that will benefit both the economy and the environment. As fuel shortages and skyrocketing gas prices become more common, we're already seeing the early impacts of this crisis. The global energy market is becoming increasingly unstable. Countries are struggling to keep up with rising demand, and the situation is only getting worse. What happens when this instability reaches its peak? Consider how quickly things can spiral out of control. In 2021, fuel prices surged dramatically due to supply disruptions. Gas stations ran dry, and people were left in long lines, frantically filling up their cars. It didn't take long for prices to skyrocket, and panic buying took over. That's just a glimpse of what could happen when a fuel shortage hits on a much larger scale. How long will it take before oil supplies collapse entirely? When oil prices rise, the impact is felt across the economy. Transportation costs soar, and goods become more expensive. The homeless crisis deepens as families struggle with increased living costs. The strain on basic goods is hard to ignore, and yet many of us still fail to take this threat seriously. Why? The answer isn't just about sitting back and waiting for the worst. To prepare for potential energy challenges, proactive steps such as investing in sustainable energy and improving infrastructure are essential. High taxes are already making life harder for everyday people. We need to find ways to create more sustainable energy sources, stockpile resources, and develop alternative solutions to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. It's not just about surviving the crisis, it's about building resilience for the future. How do we prepare ourselves, our families, and our communities for an uncertain future where fuel shortages and price hikes are the new normal? While the crisis may pose significant challenges, we can take proactive steps to minimize its effects. By preparing now, we can reduce potential disruptions and build resilience for the future. Number 10. Solutions to homelessness. As we face a rapidly approaching energy crisis, stockpiling fuel and essential resources like food and medicine is crucial. The collapse of oil supplies will hit hardest when we're least prepared. We witnessed this in 2021, when gas stations ran dry and panic spread. Fuel shortages aren't just an inconvenience, they are a real threat to our daily lives. The homeless crisis could intensify, leaving many in desperate situations. How do we survive when these basic needs become increasingly out of reach? While short-term measures like stockpiling resources can help in the short term, but long-term solutions are crucial, such as investing in affordable housing programs, expanding access to mental health services, and strengthening community-based support networks. Cities like Portland and Houston have shown positive results by implementing such approaches. With gas prices reaching $5 per gallon and rising, what happens when the last drop of fuel is gone? In the face of these shortages, immediate action is essential. Fill up your tank now. Waiting until the problem worsens could leave you stranded and unprepared for the worst. The government must act swiftly to help those most vulnerable. As oil prices soar, families already struggling with high taxes and rising living costs are at even greater risk. Programs to help the homeless must be expanded, with emergency funding for housing and basic needs. Without action, we face ghost towns, where entire communities are left without resources to survive. In the absence of government intervention, NGOs and local communities must step in. Working together, we can provide shelter and food supplies, ensuring no one is left behind. But what are we waiting for? The crisis is already unfolding. As one expert said, if we don't prepare now, we'll find ourselves in a nightmare country where basic resources are simply out of reach. The time to act is now, before the ripple effects of fuel shortages disrupt every aspect of our lives. How can we, as individuals and communities, prepare for the future and address these critical challenges? It's time to think about long-term solutions and support each other through these changes. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's work together for a more resilient future. We must act now, as the challenges of poverty and homelessness are pressing issues. With concerted efforts, we can create solutions that make a real difference. What are your thoughts on rising fuel prices and the possibility of gas stations running dry? Have you started preparing for what's coming? Rising homelessness, high oil prices, and the ongoing energy crisis are serious challenges we face head-on. It's not just about what the government can do, but how we, as individuals and communities, can respond. Whether it's stockpiling essentials or supporting each other, now is the time to prepare. How are you preparing for a potential crisis? What can we do together to meet these challenges? Share this video and start a conversation with your friends and family about how we can all take action to reduce our energy consumption and support those in need. Subscribe to Roam Kind, and remember, you heard it here first. Thanks for watching.